You're listening to Raiding the Fringe with Poda, Ostinius, Nepids, and Dr. Lee. From ancient civilizations to the cutting edge of science, from exploring the outer reaches of space to the Atlantean depths, we discuss the topics of the unknown and the possibilities of the bizarre. Are you hungry to expand your horizons? Come get your fill as we raid the Fringe.
Greetings, adventurers. I am here. I'm the host for this evening, Ostinius, and with me, as always, is Poda.
What's up?
Net.
Good evening.
And Dr. Lee.
Hello.
Tonight, our discussion is going to revolve around dimensions, alternate dimensions as it were. Anybody excited to kick off the conversation?
Length, width, and height.
What about
Internal volume dimension.
what about depth?
Death.
Death
Death.
would be a dimension.
Death could be a dimension.
Death is a dimension.
Like in
okay.
Yu-Gi-Oh! The shadow dimension is technically the death dimension.
There are plenty of
Yes.
things that say that is a possibility. Nepids, you seem to have declared death is a dimension. You want to kick us off?
Yeah, I can definitely kick off. Dimensions to me would be something along the lines of a different plane of existence. To me personally, heaven or the heavenly realm would be a dimension. The celestial realm would be a dimension. Beings that would be living in these places, I call these beings interdimensional beings. They can't cross over. It is stated that in the Garden of Eden, that's when the heavenly dimension was actually intertwined with our earthly dimension. So I believe dimensions are just different aspects of existence that other entities or other beings could dwell in.
Now, do you mean stages of existence or...
No, I mean just pure existence. In these dimensions, I guess I would say that I believe that they have basically no time, no anything like no aspect of this worldly dimension we live in now. They're completely almost unfathomable to understand as us humans because we are in this dimension. I believe that they're separate. They can be melded in. They can visit. That would be my viewpoint on dimensions and other beings that live in those dimensions.
Going from a scientific angle with string theory and the explanation of the other dimensions as far as that goes, kind of goes along with that because it basically explains, since we generally live in a three-dimensional space, that these other dimensions are going to be completely unfathomable to us because we can only observe these three dimensions. But through a fourth or a fifth dimension, should it slide through and intersect with the three dimensions that we know, it would become visible and perceivable in our dimension, even though basically it's still in its own dimension, just cutting through. Therefore, to us, it'd be slipping in and out of our dimension, but to a fourth dimension, it's merely just traveling along its own path as normal.
Yeah, it's just another plane of existence. My true belief is that anytime you hear an alien or anything like that, that is nothing more than just an interdimensional being instead of an interstellar being. So those entities came from another dimension, not our own perceived universe. That's just my viewpoint on things.
Now,
I mean, I'm not an expert by any means. Or
are you only talking about those special type of beings? What about the possibility of alternate dimensions where one timeline is this and each decision you make branches off to a new timeline, ultimately creating another dimension of humans to humans, not necessarily these altered beings to humans?
I am not entirely on board with that aspect of dimensions. I believe all the dimensions are fixed. I don't know how many there are, but I don't believe that they branch off by decisions, or even that these dimensions aren't directly affected by this world. I believe that they are a space for certain entities to dwell, and that the effects of humans and on this earthly plane have no effect on them. Now, they will have an effect on us.
So you're saying it's more like worlds in a video game where you could travel back and forth, but they are their own thing, not made to cross over. Just some can.
Yeah, I would have to say that us as humans in this plane of existence, I guess, could affect the other dimensions, but I see the other dimensions affecting this plane more.
All right, I've got lots that I could say about that.
Okay.
But to be kind about it,
Don't put
let's
a but.
just say
Like, why do you have to be kind? There's no reason.
no. Let's move.
I mean, I'm
the
giving my
conversation forward
thoughts.
and have everybody.
I'm not even an expert or I claim to be. I'm just saying, like,
No, that's your personal belief.
Yeah.
So personally, you don't believe in a multiverse, as it were. You believe in a construct of dimensions, alternate dimensions, for alternate dimensional beings.
More as in realms.
yeah, realms.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. They're fixed. They're not ultimately creating multiples or anything like that. Once it was created, it was created.
Okay, Poda, let's get your take on this. You haven't talked yet.
He's
What do
still
you
not talking
personally
now.
believe, or do you want to make a comment on what we've already talked about?
I am inclined to agree to a fixed number of set layers, not so much separate dimensions in the sense of that hardcore barrier, but more layered on top of, intermingled, that which we can't perceive the higher ones, and we don't care to understand the lower ones.
So you're putting an actual, like, structure to it. Like, there are higher and lower. You're not
saying
saying
like
that they coexist anywhere.
Like a Dante's fire, like there's the 7 layers of...
Great story. Not 100% that, like, okay, down there is hell and purgatory just because it's south. I'm just going off of my life before, given my life now. I do not claim to completely understand, but what I'm learning, given what I used to know and am learning now, there is a certain set numbers, don't know how many, but we don't have the capability to create an entirely new dimension based on our own decision, because that takes into account every other person on the planet.
All right. Now, Poda and Net, both of you have talked about how the fact that we can make a decision to branch off another dimension is not a possibility.
I believe.
But
yes.
let me put it forth to you. The idea of this multiverse, where every single dimension is slightly different from our current one, if you could slide between dimensions, just to go ahead and put that sci-fi TV show reference out there for sliders. But if you could go into the next dimension where everything's different except for that one decision, what if that dimension already existed? The difference of it branching is not a branch. The next dimension happens to be exactly the same except for that decision that was made. Therefore, it's not created by that decision. It already existed, but the only difference is the alternate decision. The quantum theory that every decision made is made in every possibility at the same time, and the one that we settle on as our reality is our dimension. But had it been the other one, butterfly effect, the whole universe can wind up being different at the end. Not to say it didn't exist before, but up until that decision splitting point, our dimensions seemed identical.
And that would be the string theory you speak of. Like if I ordered something from a restaurant, they brought it to my table until they removed that giant metal cover. It's every option.
No, that's Schrodinger's cat. That's
the experiment of Schrodinger's cat, and that is quantum theory. That's not necessarily a string theory itself, but it is until something is observed that every possibility happens at the exact same time. But the theory of the multiverse of interdimensionality is that there is some place where it settled on the other result.
I guess the thing I have a difference is that's putting a lot of importance on us.
No, it's not.
No. I mean, like, let's say, okay, so we're talking about dimensions, and they're saying that every decision that we make as humans... No, I'm just saying every decision... Well, okay, then I don't quite understand.
No, it could be a decision that has nothing to do with people. You know, say a rhino decided to turn left in Africa instead of going with the rest of its herd, and that will change everything.
Then that puts I feel like that puts too much emphasis on this plane of existence or this dimension. That every decision can change another dimension. Like I said, I think all the dimensions are fixed. We're the third dimension, or I don't know.
Right, but that doesn't change. It's not based on our decision. It's from our perspective. That's what the difference is. Not that one creates the other.
Poda.
With what you're saying, Lee, are you saying that with each decision, every possible conceived decision has already been, it would have to already be running?
Yeah, basically.
So there would be multiple yous all coinciding with each other except for certain decisions.
It's a tree with branches, and those branches flower out.
But what I'm saying is the branches are an illusion. Branches are a way for us to determine where the differences lie between the dimensions.
Okay.
But every branch actually traces backwards. And up until that point, they all looked identical because up to that point, all decisions have been made the same.
Yes.
My great-great-great-grandson will say yes instead of no to did you eat that atomic bubblegum? And that will make the other universes apparent. It will make them discernible from our own.
I must be above my pay grade because I don't quite understand what you're trying to explain to me.
Let me finite the number, because what you're talking about is a lot of possibilities for me to conceive.
Literally infinite.
Yeah.
Let's just limit it to 5. Say there's only 5 choices for one decision. Are you saying that there's 5 yous all making that one choice, and then that alters each one of those in a ping-pong pattern?
Paths.
Basically.
They could line up again. So say chose path number 5 instead of path number 3, and then that led them on radical paths that gave other options. But then those options somehow led to a similar decision to say that both of those two picked decision 1, and now they're back in the same kind of concourse. So not a lot might change, but a lot could change depending on the divergences of every conceivable option to that point.
Right, but the way I'm presenting it, imagine you're playing a video game. Well, a very simple one where it only allows you choices as you play. You hit record, and you play option A every time. The second time you play the game, you play option A, B, A. The third time you play the game through, you choose all Bs. All right? Now you've got 3 separate recordings of you playing that game. Now overlap them, like so your layers are on top of each other. And you can only choose one to observe. All 3 games got you the same ending because you did whatever the game required to get you that same ending. Even though it ended up the same and it began the same, and you made divergent choices, which to you was a branch. All 3 of those games are recorded in their entirety. All 3 of them exist. All 3 of them have you starting the game. All 3 of them have you ending the game, even if the decisions all wound up with the same ending because you have a different history still.
Okay, so you would agree that the beginning and the end are fixed, but all those paths in between...
That is only in, from what I'm gathering, that's only in his short example that he gave you. Ultimately, there's ultimate things.
So,
Right.
okay, I guess I just don't understand, like, what do we learn from that aspect, or what do we gain from that aspect to think, if I made this decision, it would have went this way, or if I made this decision, it would have went that way. So obviously, every decision I made, there has to be multiple me's in some other dimension that made this decision.
Let me propose something else. If you beat yourself into the ground as far as that, that's an existential crisis where you're thinking that I could have made all these other decisions, and now you're consciously beating yourself in the ground.
Yes, but then what's the point to contemplate, infinite amounts of anything?
To try to be the best version you can of yourself, if you want to go that route.
No, I don't quite.
It's basically, it gives you a
Wouldn't you have to observe the other things to understand and try to be a better?
You have to observe the decisions that you made and the consequences that came from those decisions that you made.
Yes, but you can do that without thinking
decisions.
of multiple dimensions.
Regardless of your ability to comprehend other dimensions, whether you see it as realms or as dimensions, ultimately the whole thing is a tool for us to better understand ourselves by opening up your mind to the possibilities that there are alternatives to what you are observing. So whether or not it's realms and interdimensional beings, that's where you have to learn and admit to yourself that there are other beings than myself that come into play, and the human is only a small part of this entire thing. Or whether you say, I myself am only one of many decisions I could make, I would like to consider those other decisions so I could make my best decisions. Either way, the whole thing is just a practice to better yourself, because as we are limited to our dimension as far as observance goes, all we can do is theorize and try to use that to better our current condition off of what we think.
Okay.
Okay, and that is actually one of the prime directives of self-reflective meditation, is to think upon oneself. Think of how your actions affect the outside realm and what you could have done to have changed it in whatever way. But like you said, thinking outside yourself. We have to go outside the boundaries of one's own self and how you personally perceive this. There are documented cases of people who may have traveled trans-dimensionally. I'm going to bring up one case and we'll get your thoughts. I'm going to go around the table. The legend of the Green Children of Woolpit. Legend, this is a thing that is historically recorded, but it concerns two children of unusual skin color. They had a green tint to their skin, who reportedly appeared in the village of Woolpit in Suffolk, England, sometime in the 12th century. These are kids' cottage times, as best recorded as we have it. The children, brother and sister, were of generally normal appearance except for the green color of their skin. They spoke in an unknown language and would only eat raw, broad beans. Eventually, they learned to eat other food and lost their green pallor, but the boy was sickly and died soon after he and his sister were baptized. The girl adjusted to her new life, but she was considered to be rather loose and wanton in her conduct. After she learned to speak English, the girl explained that she and her brother had come from St. Martin's Land, a subterranean world inhabited by green people.
Okay.
Wow.
But these children appeared, had this unknown language, and lived among these people and claimed to have come from some subterranean land. No one in the British Isles knew what the hell they were talking about, knew what was going on. They were just these weird kids that they found.
Now, did they ask, like, where did they come from? Like, as in which direction they came from?
They didn't speak English.
No, when they finally
spoke English.
After she learned to speak English, the girl explained that she and her brother had come from St. Martin's Land. There was a subterranean land. When taken to the spot,
that doesn't necessarily denote prove of dimensions. That just proves that there could be actually subterranean aspects of this earth that we don't know and people living in there.
Well,
no, I'm just saying, like, that doesn't necessarily say dimension.
If we want to try debunking stuff, I mean, seriously, if you eat only one food, you're going to get a pallor, and perhaps we could run an experiment. Only eat broad beans and see if you don't turn greenish.
No, it's eating the broad beans that made them not be greenish.
I thought you said once
all they
got
ate.
into a
That's
regular
all
diet.
they ate originally when they first were found. That's all they
And they
would
were
eat.
green.
No, eventually they started eating other foods and stopped being green. They were green before they ever touched a broad bean.
Cave moss.
Well, there's cave moss. England is an isle. Seaweed is prominent.
Okay.
Icelanders make green bread out of seaweed and shit.
Sick people often are said to look green. They could have been sick children. And if we were two children running away and living out on our own and being discovered, we'd have our own secret language for each other.
But again, like what you were saying when I asked originally, just kind of like it just brought back in my mind. I was like, with that aspect of what you were telling me, it puts a lot of emphasis on the self, on the person here and now. You did say at the end that it is a self-study. You know what I mean? So that puts a lot of emphasis on yourself. And then you said no, but then at the end you said it was a self-study. So I was just wondering.
It's a self-study to keep you from thinking about yourself.
Okay, cool.
It's designed to make you realize how much you're concentrating on yourself.
My point of bringing up that story was to invite the fact that maybe these kids were from an alternate dimension where maybe one of those choices branched off, that they became a subterranean group of people.
No, I get what you're trying to do.
Not anything.
Nobody had records of these kids. They just showed up one day.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first thing that came to my mind was the actual subterranean, like it does exist. We just don't know about it.
Was there anything in the information available that would push either direction to support more the dimension or Hollow Earth?
I would say that her being loose would mean Hollow Earth, right? But
even if you believe in Hollow Earth, it doesn't start in England. I'll just say that.
It can definitely end in England, though.
Anyone who was labeled as odd, not fitting in, not not following everything. Of course, all the women in the town are going to call her loose and all of that stuff. That was common practice. And this we're talking, Old England.
Yeah, 1200, he said, I believe.
Yeah, this is...
And plus...
I find...
Okay.
No,
I could see that history wasn't recorded so well in the 12th century.
no. Okay, then what's your thing? So I got my idea that dimensions are fixed, actual places where beings themselves dwell. He has the idea of, they're a self-study and that each decision makes another, infinite decisions. And
you're asking my personal belief?
Yeah,
No, that's not my personal belief. That's just one that I found entertaining.
Okay.
Personally, I actually believe in both of them. I believe that there is another reality, and there are meditations and mind-altering drugs that will get that person where they need to go, as far as that is. Mm-hmm. And there could be glimpses of other dimensions. DMT, the spirit molecule. There are so many recorded cases of people who have had no experience with each other, don't know each other, totally separate cases that have had the same experience with a similar, drug or actuator that has put them in that proper space of mind. Religions around the world, I am not religious myself. There's something, but I don't know what it is. I will not put a name to it or anything like that. But interdimensional beings and those cases of people seeing things and reporting through, I don't know, maybe a drug-induced haze or something like that, all seems familiar. If it's the thing that gets you to that point, awesome. With a lot of Christians and stuff, it is hardcore prayer. With some, it's handling snakes and going shabba-la-blah-blah up and down an alley. If that's what gets you to that point, that's awesome. But there's no denying that there may be a glimpse into an alternate reality where those beings may or may not exist. We had the ghost hunting episode and stuff. I've seen way too much stuff myself to say that it doesn't exist. And I feel like those certain things are glimpses from another reality that I cannot personally explain or put a name to. I'm just leaving myself open to the fact that there may also be other things besides those predetermined, whether you call it extraterrestrial or you call it angelic or you call it demonic, dimensions, that there could be a multiverse where every decision you make branches off into something else. Maybe there is extra life when you die and you're reincarnated, and those moments of deja vu where you remembering you doing those same things, that was one decision that you made the same in a previous life that you made this life. Although scientifically it says that the neurons file it in your short-term memory and your long-term memory at the same time, and it's a misfiring of synapses. There's lots of things that could be said about all of this kind of stuff. I'm just opening up the doors to the possibility that maybe there are other dimensions. These kids could come from this other dimension. There's another thing that I will get into, but I'm going to... Poda, you look inquisitive.
Last thought I have on these green children. Given the facts that you have available, you mentioned the green skin. Was there any other biological indicators that would indicate to anybody that they may not be 100% human? An extra toe, clothing, what was their corneas, hair, teeth?
Were they snorkels?
Snorks,
my bad.
Come along with the snorks. No, there was nothing else that guided it towards that way. And after a regular diet, once they adapted to it, lost, the pigment, and they became very much like regular people. They didn't even have an accent once they finally learned to speak English.
And there was no indication of...
But they learned in England. They'd have to have an accent.
To us, they would have an accent. God blimey.
No indication, given they came from a subterranean place, that the sunlight bothered them in the beginning?
No, Ooh. They did not get sunburns. They were not adversely... Like, their eyesight was not inhibited by the sun.
In defense, I would have to say, remember, this is the 1200s in England.
12th
they probably
century.
all had problems with the sun regardless.
I understand, but they would at least said something. Like, how long have they, you also don't know how long they were out from under the subterranean.
I also want to say they spent time, well, the brother died, but the girl at least, they spent a lot of time learning English from the people they're talking to, who obviously had their own takes and stories on I wonder where this girl came from. And children are impressionable enough that they could have created this backstory by being impressed on them as they're learning the language.
And also, isn't there like some cases that around mining towns and stuff like that, people begin to have like, discoloration to their skin because of the minerals that they're around and stuff like that?
Oh, that's a good...
You know what I mean? So
Copper, when it rusts, it turns green.
And this could have been from a tribe that in the 1200s? That definitely could have been in a tribe area.
Copper mining to make tin. That actually makes a lot of sense.
Now, again, their language, they would probably be part of some tribe, or they just made up a language between them two.
Dialect.
Were they twins?
They were of an age. That's all I know.
Well, I mean, psychologically, I would say it was very likely that the children lost their family, probably were staying in a mine for who knows how long. They invented their own little language so they could talk to each other, they developed their own little backstory.
Or even
that's
better,
how they survived.
Or even better, they actually had a community of children that lost their parents, and they all came to that and gathered there, kind of like the Lord of the Flies, but they live in an abandoned mine.
You just totally blew the lid on this wide open, Net. I never even thought about that. I never even considered that. That's great.
Well, I mean, I don't try to look I like looking for supernatural or kind of weird things, but most likely in any honest, if you actually see it in front of you, solid, there's probably a solid reason why it's there.
Okay, I got another one for you.
Okay.
It's about the man from Taurid. So, it's this guy who arrives at a Japanese airport from a country called Taurid. People claimed his story to be true, so the crux... Blah, 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 blah. Taurid was in between France and Spain and had been in existence for over 1,000 years.
Oh, those two have been right up against each other for a very long time with nothing in between them.
So he shows up in this Japanese airport in 1954. They check... He's got a passport, and it's got other stamps from other countries that don't exist. Mm-hmm. Then he mysteriously disappears from the airport while he's being questioned.
As in, fades to black?
No, as in he goes to the bathroom. People walk him to the bathroom, and he never comes out again.
Okay.
Did the TSA exist back then?
No.
No, especially not in Japan after they got bombed, dude. That's less than 6 years.
Well, the weird thing is that it wasn't crazy to him that he meant to go to Japan, and he spoke Japanese among other languages.
Okay.
That sounds like a possibility from another dimension where possibly the countries are divided. And
I would have to say that could possibly be some type of aspect, but again, they could have just made up a passport. Those 1950s, not unimaginable, especially to throw the Japanese off or something. Where there's just a lot of things like that right there doesn't, to me, prove of an existence of someone traveling to another dimension. That just proves that there's some smart people out there that like to pull the wool over a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah, but what's the point of pulling the wool over someone's eyes just
to get into Japan without being? You said he disappeared. He had a reason to be there. He spoke fluent Japanese, so obviously he trained to be there.
A good investigation would focus on motive. Why would someone do this? And I would also have to say that we already know this is near wartime, and infiltrating the enemy with false information
wasn't really near wartime.
It was not long after a war. That was about 10 years. 10 years after World War II. We dropped the biggest bomb in the world just 10 years ago.
Yeah, and he did not go to the site where the bombs were dropped.
No, I'm not. I'm not stating that fact. What I am saying is, the dude had a purpose for being there. You say he spoke fluent Japanese. He had a reason to be there. Maybe he needed to be in a certain part of this airport. So having that specific passport and that story would get him to where he needs to be, and then obviously went to a bathroom. I'm just saying.
Okay, World War II was over in 45, so...
Yeah, it was about 10 years.
Well, 9 years.
9, well, so...
So I
Yes,
would discount war as a motive.
Yeah, I mean... That's
No, I'm not
nothing
saying
different.
war itself is a motive. I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of...
Espionage.
Yeah, we're always somewhere.
Poda.
Did he check his luggage? Did he have luggage? Was there anything identifiable about him besides the passport?
Poda, I love your questions, but the information that he gives us is just exactly what he wrote.
Yeah,
He
that's
has no
all
more.
the information I have. They didn't say, he had a briefcase holding 3 G-strings. We knew this guy was crazy.
Was his
And a
left eye
Twinkie.
brown?
Yeah, I have no idea.
I need to know how many fingers he had.
10 as far as I'm given.
Allegedly.
What did he look like?
He was a white man, obviously.
He was
Yeah,
a white
Anglo-Saxon?
Caucasian. No, he was a white Caucasian man with a beard.
French. I'm not saying all
They
French are
s-
white, but I'm just
No,
saying.
they said that he looked very French. Everybody presumed him to be French.
And who knows what the French
And
were
he
doing
said he
back
came
then.
from a country in the border between France and Spain.
Yes.
Which bathroom did he go into?
The men's. he was.
No, really, he went to the one that was on the left, but not the one down the hallway.
He
to the
looked
right.
oddly.
Did he
There
go
was-
to the right one? He's from a different
There was
dimension.
the man with 2 legs. There was the woman with the triangle on her legs.
I would say he had
He
to
was
open
looking
the
for the man
door.
with the square. He was confused.
Now, are we sure this dude had clothes?
These are called restrooms. Where I'm from, they're
No,
called
I get what
activity
you're
rooms. 'cause That's where all the activity happens.
This is where all the stuff goes down.
I get what you're saying. I'm not trying to down everything that you pick up. That definitely would bring up conversations of some type of
I'm just trying not to.
timeline that would be different in some different area.
Exactly. The capability that it is possible
Yeah, I get what you're trying to say. I
is
just
just as prevalent as the capability of, these alternate dimensional beings. And,
yeah. I mean, I get it. I'm just just talking.
Because the Gaul from the ancient Roman times and everything that took up a lot of France and
That's
Spain, and so if that had if the wars and with Constantine and everything, if that had settled differently, there could have been an extra country inserted in there when the new lines got drawn on the map, so to speak.
Yeah, I watched some things about if Rome never existed and how things could actually, could have went, and definitely there, things would have differently, very much so. Like the whole European continent or Europe in a whole would have not been so advanced. They'd have been still tribal people for a way longer time, because the Germanians weren't really wanting to change.
It's hard to say for sure. I mean, they've got scientists working in teams guessing, and it is all what ifs. But it's possible that,
Well, they would need another superpower comparable to Rome at that time, and if Rome didn't exist then, you know what I'm just saying?
Right.
Like, let's
And
say it did
what-
exist, but not as a superpower.
But what I'm saying is, like, the Celtics, as we knew them, were very barbaric,
Well,
from
I
our
would-
perspective.
I would say they would be more like Indians. They were the Indians of the American nation. They almost exactly were.
Well,
They worshipped nature. They lived in tribal.
But my point is they fought each other, and we would assume that they would never become technically advanced on their own because they were too busy killing each other
Well,
and
yes.
drinking. But who knows if a Celtic Hitler wouldn't have come along without the Romans having had their influence, if something like that had happened and actually organized them for a chance.
I don't know.
And then, who's to say that couldn't have happened?
The Franks did pretty well as a tribal nation too. The French
Man, I
Franks.
love their food.
You know what I mean, though. But like, that's just going into what if history of Europe.
Oh, no, it could have branched out in any number of ways. My only thing that I hooked you with is that you're opening yourself to the possibility of alternate realms.
No, I'm
And
not
that-
open
yeah,
to it.
you
But I'm
are.
open
You-
to discussing or just talking. But
you said
my
that.
belief system stays into a fact of fixed dimensions. There is no, I don't believe anything
how-
that I'm discussing, but
Would you put a number to these dimensions?
I do not have a number. It could be 1, and it could be, 2, counting ours, but it could be more than that. I don't have a number specifically. I just know that there are fixed number that exist. I'm sorry, I don't have that number for you.
You know. It is your belief.
Yeah, it is my belief. My belief personally. Yes. Okay. I'm not trying to convince anybody. I would say that there is 2 and then about to be 3 and then about to be 1. But that goes into some other stuff. But
if we're going by what we truly believe, I'm having fun with the whole what if and multiverse, and I can find some good philosophical points that can be made by exploring that, but I'm going to have to go with string theory. I do believe that there are other actual literal dimensions, not that there's other dimensions of existence, but that there are other ways of perceiving the universe than we can through our 3-dimensional limitations. So for me, I do not believe in other realms. I don't really believe in other parallel universes of alternate choices or anything. That's super fun, and I love that stuff, but I really believe that as it is, there can be more dimensions than what we can perceive, but they all exist in our universe, and it's not an alternate. It's just more of what we can't see.
I believe...
I like the way you describe
We're going to go around the
That's
table.
what I believe, like with my fixed planes of existence. They're all within this universe. It's just that I don't think there is what you just said. What did you just say?
I don't think it's what you said. What'd you say? Okay, so I agree with you from a scientific point. I believe that we have multiple dimensions that are beyond our cognitive capacity to comprehend and observe at the same time, but all of these dimensions do exist in the same time, in the same space. It's just relative, I guess.
No, I totally agree with that too. I just we can't perceive them. We've all said that at least
once. I
wouldn't
put a number to it, like 1, then 2, then 3, then 1, and then 5.
Common string theory has actually 3 main branches of string theory. So the one that I had been following had a 10-dimensional, through sheer mathematics of the way things work, they came up with 10 different dimensions. Now there's a subset of that called M theory that has an 11th dimension incorporated into that. And then there is a bosonic string theory where space-time is 26 dimensions. In all 3 cases, they believe they have found an exact number for the amount of dimensions that are out there.
Another idea, like what you just said too, is using math to figure out, because that's a lot of things that happen on Earth can be solved with math. So with that saying, like I said, I wasn't putting a number on how many dimensions, but if math says it, most likely it would be around that way if we're smart enough.
All right, I'm going to point the camera at Poda. He's biting at the bit.
No, I was just thinking. You brought in mathematics and numerology, sacred geometry. Mathematics is a universal language, which is fascinating in itself. I don't fully agree with this new math that's coming out.
Oh, no.
A little weird.
No one does, because they're trying to teach it differently.
You know what's funny is every generation has their own new math. And when you grow up with it, it's math.
Yeah, the metric system.
My car gets 12 rods to the hogshead, and it's going to stay that way.
Nice.
But yes, math is universal because it has nothing to do with language. It has what is and what becomes what by applying it to itself. But I would also like to put forth that is our understanding of math limited to our 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
So the fact that we, it's like you have a giant box underneath your Christmas tree, and when you open it up, you find a smaller box. Now you know that box contains a box, but you don't know what's in the smaller box. Mm-hmm. So if we open it up and we find a 4th and a 5th dimension definitive, not only in theory, but that we figured out how to observe, exponentially, that's going to expand what we should be able to do.
Yes.
Push my glasses up. But exponentially, that will expand what we can learn and know about the universe. It may prove a lot of our fundamentals in 3 dimensions wrong because we have that 4th dimension perspective and say, oh, well, what we thought works for our situation, but it's actually this bigger rule that we haven't learned yet. And applying that new, bigger rule, we're going to say, oh, well,
Yeah.
I guess there's 123 dimensions.
'Cause
I didn't know.
We don't know how to calculate the nuances because we don't know what the nuances are. We can't
Exactly.
perceive
So we
the
can't put a
nuances.
number of dimensions that are out there.
Conversely, though, that extra dimension might just reaffirm what we already know, and we were already there.
And that
Yeah.
would change the terminology of what we perceive of the laws of the universe. Because
Yes.
those laws of which we
Yeah.
have are based on our perception.
A lot of them are
this.
theories. There's very few
Oh, yeah.
laws.
All right. So, in conclusion, Lee, wrap it up. What is your basis, your take on dimensions, as it were? Like in a nutshell, wrap it up. We'll go around the table.
Oh, I prescribe to dimensions as a mere physical property of what we already are in, as in length, width, height, time, extra dimension that we don't have a name for. Dimensions as they are merely ways of expressing the universe as it sits.
Okay. Yep.
Again, my basis is that these are a plane of existence, that interdimensional beings, be it, like you said, spiritual beings, angels, demons, godheads, whatever you want to call it, these things dwell in this other dimension, and it can cross through here. There are, I'm not saying there's one, I'm saying there's multiple. There could be there is no number I could put on it because I don't know. But I believe that they are planes of existence for other entities and other things that we can't fathom. And that's what I would call a different dimension other than the plane of Earth.
All right, Poda.
I believe, mathematically backing, that we have multiple dimensions within our own universe, which would be time, length, width, space, and that we inhabit we can't overlap them, but they are overlapping us. And the entities that people experience that would be considered extra-dimensional, extraterrestrial, outside of our conception of reality, be it them enter in and fade past or intervene in someone's life, they were born from a place outside of space and time itself. Therefore, they are able to move in between those to interact with us. Our conception of all these dimensions is finite. We have learned a lot in the time we've been here, but the acceptance of something that doesn't equal out in an equation is argued about until the cows die.
That's an interesting way of putting it.
Yes.
All right. I, Ostinius, prescribe to the belief that there are many, many things that our feeble human minds cannot perceive. I believe these things are of a nature and do exist in a absolute form, but our minds can't perceive the unknowable, and we don't know about it because we can't fathom it.
We can't perceive the unknowable.
I
I like that.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't understand.
I'm finding it hard to grasp what you're talking about. Yeah, it's because you couldn't, the guy, who's the guy?
Who's the boss?
Call of Cthulhu.
Just talking
Ganza.
about Shaft, baby.
H.P. Lovecraft?
H.P. Lovecraft,
Oh,
in his books often described unknowable horrors from alternate dimensions that just made their way into ours. People have put tentacles to most of them and things of that nature, but putting the body to something that is described as just an unknowable horror limits it. And we limit it to put recognition in our own feeble human brains. The dimensions are infinite, and some can be proved through string theory and physical science to a point, but the unknowns are just that, unknown. And so we ponder the science and we ponder the perceptions of us as a people and leave open that quandary. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye.
Peace.